We welcome you back to Sports Radio, ESPN1420.com. Ron Guidry, our guest. Ron, of course, is going to be officially inducted into the UL Hall of Fame this week. The actual ceremony dinner will be Thursday night, and then on Saturday will be the chance for everybody to wave at him and all that good stuff during halftime of the game against ULM this coming weekend. We were talking before we went on the air today, and I told you I'm a native New Englander, and you of course spent a lot of time in New York. And when you first got to the point where you were with the big club and you were there for good, there were a lot of folks who didn't know quite how to take who you were, because after all, you were from Louisiana. You talked funny. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows that everybody in the country knows Louisiana's all swampland. Mm-hmm. You got to ask a lot of crazy questions.
Well, first thing they wanted to know, I had to take my shoes off because they wanted to see if I had webbed feet or not. I mean, I actually had to take one shoe off. Show them, look, dude, my feet are just like yours. I don't have webbed feet. I mean, you hear the stories, but and that's the thing with. You can have fun with them too, because now I didn't do it the first few years because I was an unproven rookie. So I minded my P's and Q's as a young rookie. I didn't pull anything. I didn't play any practical jokes or anything. But once you become established, and then they look at you at a different light, and you have a little bit more clout behind you, you can do a lot of things. And I used to threaten them all the time about, look, the next time I'm home, I'm going to go in the marsh or in the swamp, and I'm going to get a few little things, and I'm going to bring them back, and somebody's going to find them. They didn't like hearing things when I started talking like that. I'd wet my fingers sometimes and just pass by and just kind of pass it on a guy's neck, and he'd hit his head jumping on the ceiling. I mean, they'd be really, really afraid sometimes. Guys would, if I would say, hey, I need to say something, everybody just drop what they're doing, and it would be quiet.
When you became established there in New York City, to this day, you're probably one of the most popular Yankees ever. And probably who you were, where you came from, the stories that were written, all of those probably had an awful lot to do with all of that, besides the fact that you were a very good baseball player. And I laughed last summer. We were up in New York, and your daughter Jamie was coming. We were all going to have dinner together, and a guy walks by. You're standing outside the restaurant. You're waiting for Jamie and Mike to get to the restaurant, and a guy walks by, and he's about 3 steps past, 4 steps back, and he just freezes. And he turns around and he yells at the top of his lungs, "Oh my God, it's Louisiana Lightning." Now, he didn't go up to shake hands with you. He didn't ask to take a picture with you. He didn't ask for an autograph. He didn't go hug you. He said it, and then he was walking with his friend, and I was in front of him. You were behind him. He said, "Dude, that was Ron Guidry right there." Now, this is, 30 years after you finished playing ball. Mm-hmm. Does that happen to you a lot in New York still to this day?
It does. It does. New Yorkers are, they're very good at remembering the people who did their jobs well and played the game well. And, when you win World Series title, that's about as high as you can get. Mm-hmm. So I was fortunate that, within 3 or 4 years of playing there, we had won 2 World Series titles, and they hadn't won them since early 60s.
1961
so
had been the last time.
It brought back the glory days, and I was part of that first group who reestablished New York as a baseball power. So, and of course you had those good seasons where people remember, because they always look at those seasons and say, well, nobody's had some since those. And when they see you, the first thing, well, we wish you were pitching for us today. But, it's not how you look at it, but they remember things like that. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that it's like I said, leaving home was the hardest thing to do for me every year, to leave home. So when Bonnie and I left, we took as much of Lafayette with us as we could, whether it was the food that we were bringing, whether it was the coffee, but more or less it was our upbringing that we brought over there. So when we got up there, people up there were not accustomed to people saying yes, sir, and no, sir, and yes, ma'am, and no, thank you. You open the door for people coming in, going out. They're not accustomed to that kind of stuff. But that's how you're raised, and it's bred in you. So just because you're somewhere else, you don't forget about it. You don't take it off and say, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. It just becomes part of you because that's who you really are. So they weren't accustomed to that. And I think, that's why they really liked me and my family. And the people in New York have always been great to me and my family, not just me. But when they see us there, my family, if we're in New York, they talk to all of us. And people remember who they are. Because as a player growing up, your name's always in the paper. There are always instances where your children's names comes up and your wife's names comes up. So people read, but there are people in New York, when I walk downtown and they'll stop me in the street, they'll ask, how's Bonnie? How's Jamie, Brandon, Danielle? How are your kids doing? What are they doing? I remember a picture of this and that and this. They just don't forget.
You played and won at a time when the New York Yankees were maybe one of the more interesting franchises in history. Well, they always have been, but especially then, because you had Reggie and Billy fighting in the dugout. You had Reggie and Thurman discussing which straw was stirring just drink, and then you had Gossage, who was had the mustache and came out, and everybody, it seemed, took turns being in the headlines except you. You were in the headlines because you were winning games and the Yankees were winning games. But there was never. How did you, being a rather reserved guy from a small town where family and home and manners and everything else means so much to you, what was that like, especially that area between around 1976 to 1981 or 82? You're changing managers about every 6 games. And yet, your name was never in the newspapers except when it came to going out and throwing a 3-hit shutout.
Well, because when I reread that contract that I signed, it said that New York was going to pay me for my services to pitch, and that was it. It wasn't going to pay me for talking. It wasn't going to pay me for getting involved in anything other than my job as a pitcher. And that's the way that I looked at it. I wasn't as quiet as you make it appear to be. I said things, but I only said them as long as it was pertaining to me. If Reggie and Thurman were at an impasse and they were having a heated discussion, I'm not in there because I don't belong in there. If Billy was having a discussion with Mr. Steinbrenner, it didn't involve me, I don't belong in there. But if my name came up, I got in there. And I did a couple of times, but it's done because you need to talk about it, okay? But it's not like we're going to be mudslinging at each other. If I had a problem with Billy, and I did a couple of times, I had a couple of problems with the old man a couple of times. But we always handle them like they should be. Him and I behind closed doors, and we said what we had to say. He made his point. I said, okay, I'll do better, or you got to listen to what I'm telling you. No big deal. But unless it really pertained to me, I just kept my mouth shut. I sat in my corner of my space, And, I listen. But there are guidelines. There are guidelines. And the guys on the side of you, your teammates, they're gonna tell you how you need to weave your way in and around, in the locker room, on the field. They're gonna try to. They not only teach you the game, they teach you the etiquette to being a good person, a good ball player. Because there were a lot of guys on there that you don't hear about. You only heard about a handful. But it made for some interesting reading at the time because a lot of our team would fight with each other at the drop of a hat, but still we'd run outside and beat the heck out of somebody. Boston would come to town, you'd go out there and you should be afraid of them because they're in first place, not us. And that's how things work. And ironically, I always have said our 77 championship club was a very, very good baseball team. Very good. Whether it was good or not as the 78 club, I'm gonna have to bite my tongue because we didn't have to face in the 77 season the animosity and everything else that we faced in the 78 season. But to do what we did in 78 was much more rewarding than the 77 because we basically won from day one, okay? But in 78, we had to fight almost everything. Every day when we got up, it seems like we were fighting something else to get where we wanted to go.
You were not only, you had all of the stories that were in the newspapers and all the personalities, but that year the Red Sox were very good. And it was there was no dominating. There was no the Red Sox were awfully good.
Well, I've said this all the time. Even though I beat the Dodgers, and we had to play the Dodgers, the toughest lineup I ever faced, any time in all my years, was the 78 Red Sox, by far, from 1 through 9. It was the toughest lineup I ever had to go through. Every once in a while, you feel like you have a break. There are some teams, not with Boston. You didn't feel like that. I mean, you had to almost be on every pitch at that time. And I had the privilege to throw to Munson. It was great because I didn't have to worry too much about thinking about those pitches, whether they were the right ones or the wrong ones. I let him think about that. And he did a great job in calling my pitches. I only had 2 of them anyway. But the thing is, setting up and pitching, you have to have good control, and you got to put your pitches, especially to that lineup, you have to place your pitchers pretty much in the spot that he's calling, or else they're going to kill you.
There was a 1-game playoff that year, and you pitched on short rest. You had won 25 games. You had you were going to win the Cy Young Award. You were going to finish second in the MVP voting that year, and there was this radio station here called the Yankees and said, "Look, when Ron pitches, we got to carry the games," and it. But you got the ball on short rest to face, once again, a really, really good team. Tell me just a little bit about that game, what it was like. Because I remember I had a little TV in the control room at the radio station where I was working. We had it on. I'd turn the sound down. I'd introduce the next record. I'd turn the sound back up, watch the whole game. It was about it until Denton hit the home run. It was about as much of a nail-biting, hair-pulling type of baseball game as I've ever watched.
Well, you play 162 games, and you have to play one more to decide the East champion, the East divisional winner, and you're going, okay, well, I'll take the ball on Monday for the playoff game, even though I'm supposed to open the first game in the playoff game against Kansas City. Well, if we don't get past Boston, we ain't doing that on Tuesday night. So We got to take care of. So, I'm the logical choice. I told Lemon that I'd take the ball. And, but you're going out, and it's a little bit different. You're pitching on one less day, and it's a day game at 1 o'clock. Where things are not. I've pitched day games at 1 o'clock, but I've always had 5 days. This time it's on the 4th day. It's not on the 5th day, so I'm one less day. But when you reflect on how you got there, and the one thing about our team, regardless of the guys that were on, and we had a lot of great players, I'm not sure anybody on our club would say that they were really superstars. We had a lot of stars on the club. And the funny thing is, after the All-Star break, when we really started to play the game well, you never knew who it was night after night that would beat you. Sure, you knew Reggie could, you knew Munson could, you knew Nettles could, but we had other guys in the lineup. And if you tried to take care of, pitch around those guys, okay, I'm facing Bucky. Bucky did what he did in the playoff game. He'd get a big hit here. But, we had guys like Mickey Rivers. And that's the funny. I would walk in from warming up in the bullpen, and Mickey would ask me when I'd get in the dugout, how many runs do you think you're going to win? You need to win tonight. And I'd look at him and I'd go, if you can get one in the first inning, game's over. He'd hit a ground ball, beat it out. He'd get a base hit. He'd walk. The second pitch of the game, he'd steal. Willie would bunt, ground ball, we got to run. Well, when teams do that and you're pitching good, when you look in the other dugout, that other team's heads drop. Uh-oh, it ain't going to be easy now. And that's what it was like. We knew somebody would do something spectacular to win. So my job when I went out, I didn't say, okay, you can't give up any runs. Okay, I'm at a disadvantage already. I got one less day. I'm not 100%. I might only be 90. Okay, but I can still beat you at 90. All I got to do is keep this game close. Whenever I come out of this game, my team needs to be in a position with one swing of the bat that we can win this game. And that's all that my job is, okay? And that's the way that I looked at most of my games. When my biggest thing was when I walked off the mound, if I was losing the game, I did not sleep at night. I didn't like walking off the mound with my team losing. It didn't happen often, I'm proud to say, but it did happen. And it was not good nights for me. So when my very first pitch of the game, I still had just keep the game close. Just keep the game close. Yaz hit a home run early in the game. We were losing 1-0. I gave up another run in the 5th or 6th inning. Somewhere. We were down 2-0. I'm still pitching good, But it's like, okay, somewheres. And then, it's what I was saying. Lo and behold, here we go. Bucky hits a 3-run homer. Mickey comes up next, hits a single, steals, base hit. We got 4. Now, we didn't just score 3 runs. We scored 4 in that inning. Mm-hmm. We went up 4-2. And then Reggie hit a home run in the 8th. We went up 5-2. Okay? And then I came out in the 7th. And that's the first time, well, it could be the only time that Lemon and I ever had words with each other because I did not want to come out. I didn't think that I needed to come out. But he had already made the sign for Goose to come in, and I really didn't want Goose pitching 2.5 innings. I would rather him come in to start the next inning. Let me get these guys. Even though I gave up a hit, I still got 3 runs, and there's a guy at first, and I got 1 out. I can get another couple. I might get a double play ball here. But, I was out of the game. So, I went and I sat down. But I had guys coming in and out from the dugout. And they were just telling me that it was so nerve-wracking that it was hard for them just to sit and watch the game. And that's what we said after the game. I couldn't say that because as a pitcher, I'm not nervous. I never have been. I never got nervous. I knew I was either going to win or lose, and I did the best job that I could. But the guys that play every day, they get a little nervous. And that game was probably the most nerve-wracking game that we had all been through as a team. But when you look at that game, that game had two great teams, okay? Any one of them could have won. We were fortunate that we did. But they had great plays. They had great pitching by both teams. They had timely hitting. They had great hitting. Anything that you wanted to see in a baseball game was in that playoff game.
It was an awfully good one, and then you went and you beat my Dodgers in the World Series again. Appreciate you.
One of the funny stories, Nettles caught that fly ball by Yastrzemski,
right?
And what Nettles tells about that game was when Yaz was hitting, he kept saying, "Come on, Yaz, pop, hit a pop fly, hit a pop fly, hit a pop fly." And when the ball went up, the first thing Nettles said to himself was, "But not to me," because he was so nervous about not making the play. The sun gets in your eyes. Anything out of the ordinary, a bird flies by, hits. Something could happen. Because it's a sure out in baseball is not a sure thing, okay? There are a lot of strange things that happen in the game. So it was fun. And when he came in, he was sweating. And I looked at him and said, "What's the matter?" He said, "That ball went up." And he said, "I kept saying, hit pop up, pop up, pop." And he hits a pop up and it coming to me. And I'm going, "But not to me, not to me."
But he squeezed it, and that was the end of that. When we're gonna finish up with Ron when we come back, and we'll a couple of more things that we want to go over before we let him out of here this afternoon. Ron Guidry's our guest. I'm Jay Walker. It's Bird's Eye View on ESPN 1420 and .com.